Hello, fellow Tarnished!
And welcome to this new series where every week we'll be taking a look at a few fun builds that I've been trying. Most build guides are about min-maxed, overpowered builds that trivialize the entire game with overpowered abilities. But here instead, we're trying to make builds that fulfill a certain role-playing fantasy,
To fit a strong theme.
creating a more unique and dynamic playstyle that feels more fully fleshed out, with each build having a gimmick to master, with many options to use in combat, not just spam one move to win. And most importantly, I want my builds to look absolutely stunning. This first build is for all the Bloodborne fans out there, especially if you liked using the beast transformation in that game. Because here we'll be making use of the Beast Claw weapon from the DLC, and of course Malenia's Great Rune, which gives us time to recover lost health if we attack an enemy right after getting hit. I've always wanted to make a build using Malenia's Great Rune, but it never made much sense, because it used to nerf your health flasks very severely. Not to mention that you acquire it very late in the game, which by then you don't have much left to do. Fortunately, the DLC lessened the flask nerf, added an entire game's worth of content, and them just adding the beast claws from Bloodborne is the icing on the cake. Also, the rune gives us this blood trail thing, which looks so good. For the look, we have a somewhat traditional gothic vampire look, using the full Ansbach set, except for the helmet, where I'm using the Confessor Rod instead. This outfit is super light, so it makes us light roll, which makes us a very agile character.
For talismans, we're using the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which gives us a 20% damage buff when we bleed an enemy.
Which we'll be doing a lot of.
The Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which boosts consecutive attacks. The Godskin Swaddling Cloth, which restores health with successive attacks. And I also like to use the Viridian Amber Medallion plus 3, because this is a very stamina-hungry build. But if you can manage without it, use the Millicent Burst Thesis instead for even more damage. On our left hand, we have the Beast Claw, mentioned earlier. But on our right hand, we have the Reduvia Dagger.
We're using Reduvia because it gives us a strong projectile attack. It causes very good bleed build-up. Bleed triggers our Lord of Blood's Exaltation buff. And the weapon art is boosted by the Ansbach set, which makes it even more powerful. The idea is to buff yourself using Reduvia and then two-hand your Beast Claws. The claws are a very quick and agile weapon, making them ideal for a life seal build such as this. They also have what I think is the best feint attack in the entire game. If you don't know, feint attacks are when you hold a heavy attack and then press the dodge button to attack while dodging backwards. Not all weapons have this, but the ones that do usually cover a very small distance with a dodge, making them not very useful. But this one actually covers a very long distance, and so it's much more useful, and can lead into some of the sickest gameplay moments if you use it correctly. For weapon arts, we have two options. One is Savage Claws, which is this series of slashing attacks. They deal good bleed build-up, and they just demolish smaller enemies, and even Malenia. It synergizes very well with our build, because we attack 6 times in quick succession.
This is the best weapon art for this build, and it's the one I use most often. But not all bosses have big enough openings for it, which is why we have option 2, Raging Beast. This is one of the most fun skills in the entire game for me. You get this directional dodge, followed up by a very long leap towards your enemies. You can learn to time this to so many boss attacks, and it's just so rewarding because you get to keep the aggression. This weapon art has a follow-up attack, but it's too slow in my opinion. I actually don't switch between these two Ashes of War on a single weapon. Instead, I just keep 2 Beast Claws on my left hand slot, and I like to switch between them mid-fight. And we actually have enough endurance to do that and still light roll. Our stat distribution also allows us to cast blood incantations very effectively with the Dragon Communion Seal, and this just gives this build a bit more versatility to make it more fun. Here's the character sheet for this build. Feel free to pause if you like.
This build turns the game, and especially magic duels, into this constant back and forth of you casting your own spells and deflecting an enemy's attack or spell and just giving it right back to them, on the off chance that they too can reflect spells.
It might even just turn into a tense match.
For the look, I have this look you might have seen me use in a couple videos. This is my favorite Sorcerer look in the game.
I'm wearing the altered version of the Arabic robe,
the Preceptor's trousers, and the High Priest gloves. This outfit gives us no gameplay bonuses, but it looks cool and lets us light roll. For talismans, we have the Shard of Alexander, which boosts our weapon art damage. More on that later. The Graven Mass Talisman, which boosts our sorcery damage. The Magic Scorpion Charm, which boosts our magic damage. And the Godfrey Icon, which boosts charge spells. For weapons, of course, we're using the Shield of Night, which is a small shield that gets a projectile weapon art that gets powered up if you use it right after blocking an attack. The reason we're using the Shield of Night instead of Carrion Retaliation is that, besides it being more fun of course, it actually does scale with our dexterity, and it scales very decently too, so you can actually get much more damage out of it. It's also a much faster response to an attack. You can do it multiple times in a row, and the coolest thing
is that it works for every blockable attack,
and not just spells. The weapon skill is not considered a guard counter, but it is a weapon art, so it is boosted by the Shard of Alexander. and it does deal magic damage.
So it will be also boosted by things like the Magic Scorpion Charm, the Magic Shrouding Cracktier, and the Terra Magica. Now, this being a small shield, we face a bit of a problem. We get very little stability on our blocks, and we get tons of chip damage. Which is why we're pairing this with the Deflecting Heart here, which makes it so that timing your blocks makes them consume much less stamina, have 100% physical defense, and much higher elemental defense too. Having to time our blocks introduces this new dynamic risk-reward system, where you are rewarded for timing your blocks correctly by not taking any damage and then getting to retaliate. But the punishment for not doing it is a bit harsh, and that's why we're also pairing this with the Scholar's Shield, which reduces stamina consumption and increases our physical and magic defenses while blocking. At 65 intelligence, which is what we have for this build, the best staff to use is the Academy Glintstone staff.
For what spells to use, you get a very vast amount of choice here. You can't go too wrong with these, but here's the direction I'm going for. Since the Shield of Night deals a very decent amount of stance damage, I'm going for a stance breaking build, using tons of charged spells that deal heavy stance damage. So we're using spells like Glint Blade Trail and Glintstone Nails, both of which deal tons of stance damage and are also boosted by the Godfrey icon when you charge them. I'm also using Great Blade Phalanx, which deals some very heavy stance damage. The great thing about these spells is that you can easily set them up to hit in quick succession, dealing massive stance damage. To riposte, we're using the Magic Infused Misericord to take full advantage of our stance breaks. You can use any Ash 4 you want with it, but I recommend Carrion Sovereignty, which is a bit slow but deals massive amounts of damage and a huge amount of stance damage as well. So it goes well with our build.
I think the Shield of Night synergizes well with such an aggressive build, because it deals okay stance damage and is very fast as well. For a single use spell, I'd use the Fingernail spell. It's a very FP efficient spell, and we don't have too much FP here because of our stat distribution, so this works for us. This is the character sheet for this build. This is a very stat hungry build, so I highly recommend using the Godric Great Rune.
Lastly, there is my Earthbender build. This build makes use of the Golem Fists, which is a Smith script weapon, meaning it gets those projectiles on a heavy attack. When you're relatively close to your enemies, the projectiles deal very decent damage. If you manage to hit both the melee and the ranged part of your heavy attack, you get even higher damage, the highest heavy attack damage of any fist weapon in fact. But it consumes much more stamina. The projectiles are super useful for finishing off a low health enemy from a safe distance, or maintaining stance damage, or voice breaking an enemy that you've already done heavy stance damage to, before they recover. Since this is a strength build, we're using the Clawmark seal to cast bestial incantations, mainly the Stone of Grank, which deals some very hefty amounts of poise damage from a very large distance. We are pairing this build with the Deflecting Heart here, which we're not really building around, but you don't need to build around the Deflecting Heart here for it to be good. The Deflecting Heart here, of course, lets us deflect with our weapon. I think this really fits the theme of us being an Earthbender, you know, blocking with the stone gloves. There are two Ashes of War that I switch between. One is Horalu's Earthshaker. This is the one that thematically fits this build the most. You deal good damage in an AoE. It's cool for clearing trash mobs and such, but it's way too slow to use against most bosses. And so for them, I switched to the Shriek of Sorrow, which gives us a 10% damage boost by default, but the amount is increased when your health is low. The best part about this skill is that you don't need to stay at low health to keep the buff. You can just use the skill and then heal after, and you'll keep the larger buff. Hey, Future Clanky here. Don't use either of these weapon arts. Instead, wear heavy, but still sexy, armor, stack defense buffs, and then use Endure and just tank everything like a Chad. I honestly don't like this alternative playstyle too much, but it fits the theme so well that I had to include it. Now back to the rest of the video. Huh, that was weird. Now where was I? Ah, right. For talismans, I use the Smithing Talisman for increased projectile damage on our heavy attacks. The Axe Talisman to increase the damage on both the projectiles and the melee part of the heavy attack. Pair that with a Spiked Cracktier for an even bigger increase in heavy attack damage. We also use the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman for better stamina recovery, and the Blade of Mercy, which gives us a large damage boost when we riposte an enemy, which we'll be doing a decent amount of since we're a heavy attack build. Feel free to swap either of the physic tiers we're using to the Stone Barb Crack tier to stance break enemies more easily. And for the look, we have the altered version of the Dryleaf Robe, the Dryleaf Arm Wraps, and the Mesmer Shoulder Greaves. This is the full character sheet for this build. Hello everyone, if you made it this far, then thanks a lot. Consider liking, subscribing, and watching my other stupid videos. This is a somewhat different direction for this channel, but I've always wanted to do this. Although I have no idea if this will actually be a series or a one-off. It's up to you really, so let me know if you want more videos in this format, and bye-bye!